Welcome back, everyone, to The Day with Trae. I'm your host, Trae Holiday. Joining me right now is Miss Jacquelyn Howard. Hi.
Hi, Trae.
How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, thank you.
Absolutely. Well, you're looking amazing. Thanks so much for coming today.
Just got off a flight last night, but I wanted to make sure I showed up for you.
Oh, well, this is important. You know, this
Yes.
effort here about standing up and supporting Black women, starting with Dr. Claudine Gay. You know, some may not know this issue here, and I want to give folks the history so they can understand why you all felt the need to collectively bring your voices to this effort. Tell us more about what happened with Dr. Gay.
Well, as I think most people do know, because it was widespread on all social media and all news, Dr. Gay was appointed as the first Black woman president of Harvard University, the oldest university in this country. And we were all cheering her on, well qualified, well spoken, just wonderful woman who was put in this role. And upon reflection, you know, we probably been in positions we were the first somewhere, somehow, or still are the first. And so with that, we were, you know, cheering as Black women, cheering as a Black community, but there are people who weren't happy about that. So no matter, she went on with her charge, she was introduced, she was inaugurated, and she took on this, you know, great role, heavy role, as president of Harvard University. That was also on top of other Black women being named to major universities, Boston College, I believe, and actually Wellesley College, where my daughter goes, has a Black woman president. So as these pioneers are out there, they need support. But recently, several universities were put to task in front of Congress to address situations around the Israeli and Palestine issue that's going on around the Middle East. And you know, voices were heard, as you mentioned, on college campuses. It's a place where people's voices are raised. But several of the women presidents were brought to a congressional hearing around how they were addressing the safety of the Jewish students. And many of the Jewish students expressed discomfort and actually fear that they weren't being protected on campus because of the protests. With that said, again, I want to underscore that only 3 college presidents, university presidents were brought forth to testify, and they were all women. And Dr. Claudine Gay was the only Black woman. And they were pretty much scrutinized and put into corners around, you know, what their stance was on the use of words like genocide. And I think most people who are in these high positions are given scripts by, you know, their administration, by lawyers, by people who are in communication roles, and she was speaking to the script. And it wasn't to the suiting of a particular representative that was part of the congressional hearing. And she was basically, for lack of a better word, excuse my wording, she was crucified. And in the press, people came back and said, you should have said this, or you should have said that, and she was being held to task. And afterwards, she apologized, like the other university presidents did, for their, you know, wording, and in their hearts, they know that genocide is not a proper word to use. But with that, Harvard stood by her, but soon after, a series of people came after her. They really came after her, and then they accused her of plagiarism. And so that really started bubbling up in the social media and to the press, and then she just decided to resign. So I think we all know the pressure of being scrutinized, not feeling supported. There's a lot of discourse around what Harvard should have done, but we felt the need as Black women within this social circle that we have called Sisters of Seattle. That was the circle that I created when I moved here 7 years ago, because I didn't know anybody. And I started meeting these wonderful Black women, and we became sisters. And if you think of the acronym SOS, you know, people use that to say, hey, I'm under distress, I need some help, I need some support. But it's also the acronym for Sisters of Seattle. And within that circle are some potent women, and we were all in our right, you know, right minds, upset about what happened to Dr. Gay. And I want to credit one particular sister of Seattle, that's Lanisha De La Barladum, and she said, hey, what can we do to support Dr. Gay? We're all feeling a certain kind of way. We've probably all felt this kind of burden of being the only one, being hyper-scrutinized. No matter what we did, it was never good enough. And you know, her resignation really hurt us deeply. And so her idea, within less than 12 hours, several of us came back and said, let's do something. And so it started off as an idea to support, turned into this manifesto of writing a letter in support of her, to her, from us. And we thought we could get like 50 signatures, maybe 100. Well, now we're almost 400 signatures from women across the state of Washington that have signed on, and actually some that didn't feel comfortable but were in support of this effort. to support her. And, you know, we've gotten a lot of airplay. We've gotten some haters. We've gotten some trollers that say you're just supporting her because she's a black woman. No, it's because she's a black woman and qualified him and put under the scrutiny of the press and other, you know, really terrible people who want to see her brought down, that we stood up for her in a personal love letter to her. And it was to her from us about how wonderful she is, how blessed we are to have her, and how she will show up somewhere even more magnificent.
Right, right. You know, this is, I really appreciate this kind of organic effort,
Yes.
right? It,
Yes.
you know, again, you see something out there happening, and, you know, it's getting its own media spin. And to know, like, wait a minute, we have the power to do something. We can
Absolutely.
say and make sure she understands, like, how we are receiving her and, you know, the brilliance that she holds. I think that's really special. But also through this effort, I'm sure that there's been some things that have come out of this, right? Because it starts with Dr. Gay,
Yes.
but the idea of support in general. Tell us more about some of the impact that you're seeing from this phenomenal campaign y'all have put out
Well, I do
there.
want to step back and relate to your story about using your voice. And if you think back upon your life, and I've turned a big magical age last December, and I think in small ways and significant ways, I've spoken up for other people, because many people don't have that voice, and you feel like it's not right to leave people behind, you know, undervalued, not put in the right positions, maybe hyper criticized, maybe doubted before they can even get a chance. And so I have found myself in a number of circumstances saying, hey, wait a minute, what about so-and-so? Or hold on, where do you see that behavior? I don't see it manifesting. Or hold up, wait, that person's been left behind, and why are you teasing them? Why are you bullying them? So it comes from doing right by others. It's a golden rule, right? But also, no one should feel less than. And I think it's also because we have maybe been in that position ourselves, being made to feel like we don't belong. I know a number of circumstances I've been in where I was the only woman, the only black woman, and have been looked through like I wasn't there, like I shouldn't be there. But I was raised better than that, see? So I think we all fall back on our foundation of family, and if people don't have family, you can create that. I also have moved a number of times, and every time I've moved, I've had to create a village for myself and my family, so we can actually feel like we're not only contributing, but can be surrounded by love.
Yeah.
And so it was important for us to recognize, I think most black women had a very visceral response to what happened to Dr. Gay, because it was traumatizing for her, but also it probably brought back some trauma that we had faced, big or small. You know, I could name a number of people, and I actually looked up how many people plagiarized or have been accused of plagiarization. In fact, the man that accused her, I heard, of plagiarization, his wife actually was accused of plagiarization. So it's sad that people never look in the mirror, but their MO is to go and just cause havoc and to hurt people. And we just weren't going to tolerate it. And so we also decided we didn't want this to make this a moment, we wanted to make it a movement. And so we're continuously strategizing about our next steps to help support and stand with black women. And so we're a force of 4 right now, but we have 400 plus people behind us that want to see something positive happen. And we're still praying for Dr. Gay. She will be on the staff apparently of Harvard, still teaching like she was before. But I also heard that she was so upset about the hate mail she was getting, she stopped checking email. So the beauty of it is one of our, our sisters had a direct contact, and our letter was handed right to her. Wow. She got it placed in her hands, and she said, this is exactly what I needed. So that just warmed our hearts. We were able to get right to her directly through all the muck, through all the hate.
Wow,
Right?
what amazing, just kind of like to wrap that up, right? For her to be
Right.
able to receive it directly in her hand. Because
Yes.
that's also, I think, where, y'all decided to do something and maybe didn't foresee that direct way of getting it to her, but you still pressed on. And I think that there's something special about people gaining something from what you're sharing here today, because a lot of times, when we're just one person, I think sometimes we feel like we only have this much reach. I can only do this much. The collective nature of advocacy is very different than you being by yourself. And what are some of the ways that you've been able to kind of receive this collective nature? What has it brought for you personally?
You know, it's actually opened my eyes, Trae, because there are some people who weren't comfortable signing the letter. And in fact, as we were formulating and storming and norming quickly, we moved fast. This is within a week, we had this stuff wrapped up and people signed on. We kept pivoting, different things were coming up. But I wanted to talk to those women about why they weren't comfortable. So some people were coached, you may not want to sign that. You don't know where that's going to end up. And it's a very visible letter. It is publicly available. It's hit the press a couple of different ways. And our names are on it. And we all have families and we have roles and we have careers. I'm actually retired, but our names are out there. And so we could be victimized, but we wanted to plow forward. What if Katherine Johnson had stopped and never worked on the NASA project because she was feeling sad? You know, what if Harriet Tubman fell asleep and never woke up and said, I'm not doing this anymore? So it's a little bit of, if they said we can, we can. But it really does speak to those women who weren't able to because they felt compromised. They felt like their roles would be in danger, right? There are people who don't feel comfortable speaking up. And so on behalf of them, we did it. And we continue to have conversations. People are still signing on. This letter is an evergreen letter. So if you haven't signed it, Trae, you go right ahead. But it's available, and we continue to see the signatures grow. We're monitoring that. But I do want people to know that their voice matters. And if they don't feel comfortable by themselves, there's always someone else who's there in your corner, just like you mentioned. And fortunately, the younger people, I use it, social media helps. You put your voice out there, before you know it, you've got a couple people saying, I felt the same way. And that's the beauty, I think, of using social media the right way, is gaining a force for the good.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% here, gaining a force for the good. I always think, you know, how is this show being impactful? Am I doing, like, do I need to tweak some things? Because it's not about me. It may say the date with Trae, but it's not really about Trae. It's about the guests. It's about the stories. It's about the inspiration. And I share that often because I realize that, you know, how we utilize our platforms is very important when we think about the long-standing impacts that it has. And I think I'm always trying to encourage folks to understand how powerful social media can be if you're doing the right thing. Now, they want you to stay entertained with all this dance challenges and all this, you know, all this kind of, you know, stuff you see on there. But if you're using it for good, like you were just saying here, it's so important because it now has a long-term effect. It now goes way beyond you. It, you know, so that's something that really keeps me going. I love hearing that too. But what you mentioned here points out something to me that's also a deeper issue we need to deal with, which is the fact that as much as we work around diversity, equity, inclusion, or belonging, or all of these kind of terms that have been kind of, you know, hot terms or hot topics of the time or the day, we still have institutions that would unfortunately probably punish someone for signing a letter like this. You know, the encouragement of not wanting to sign or your name being out there, that's another sign of something that's deeper here. So I really appreciate you sharing that. But it goes to the fact that if we don't have the pioneers who do something different in the midst of that, we keep getting the status quo.
Absolutely, but I go back to the fact, if not us, who?
That's right.
If not now, when? And let me say this to you, Trae. I am proud of you. Because you don't even understand probably the ripple effect you're having right now on someone who needs to hear your voice. And I hope you hear that often, because having a show, having reach, you know, we're going to get a wave of another pickup with people that now will know you from our connections. But I'm proud of you, and I want to say that out loud, because often we don't hear that.
Thank you.
You know, and so you're making a difference. And it is scary sometimes being out there, being a pioneer. But like I said, I'm here for a reason. You're here for a reason.
Right.
We're all put in this universe for a reason, and we have to find out what that is over time. And some of us walk away mad because we didn't say something, but maybe it wasn't appropriate to say it then. So let us be guided by the Spirit. Let's be guided by the right thing. Let us not react And I believe in karma too,
Yeah.
because you're going to give some bad stuff out, it's going to come back to you eventually, right?
That's right.
I do also want to say, you know, there's a wonderful amount of books to read about the history of our country, and don't let anybody stop you from going to the library. Everything can be accessed for free. Let's do our research, let's learn our history. Unfortunately, there's a lot of embedded systems in this country that just don't want to see us succeed. But we can't hold out hope. We cannot forget about the fact that we've come so far, but as a country, we have so much more room to grow and to work on things together. And I also believe that inside everybody there's good.
Yeah.
No matter what color you are, no matter what your background. And what I love doing is finding that commonality I have with somebody that I never thought was there, right? So we're gonna find a common thread and we're gonna build on that, as opposed to looking at the differences and pushing back on each other.
That's so important.
But yeah, it's so important.
It's so important because, you know, we do deal with people that are not like us and don't have the same background, but how we come together, this kind of collective mindset, to go back to that, is so important. It's so key, but it's also so valuable. And I think that there is a need for us to explore that more, especially now when we have certain issues in our community, in our society that, you know, really position you to be more and more of an individual,
Yes.
and not to be a part of these collectives,
Yes.
but bringing it back to the collective. Again, I always talk about what our, you know, ancient ancestors did to build civilizations, and I always think of that uniformity in collectivism that was so special. So thank you. I received that. I receive you being proud of me here. That means a lot to me. Of course, if folks are wanting to find the letter, if they're wanting to connect, if they're ready to sign on, maybe they just heard about it, I want to give you some time to look right here in this camera and let them know how they connect, how they get their name on that letter.
Okay, certainly. Well, we actually used our own networks to provoke people to sign the letter. And we actually got placement in the Seattle Medium. We were picked up by, actually recently, the Atlanta Journal. We also have developed an Instagram page, so we're working on some social media. We actually had a strategy meeting last weekend to figure out how to make sure it's accessible. We can certainly give the link to you, Trae, for you to put on your social media, but it's hashtag S for stand, W for with, B for black, W for women. So standing with black women, and that's the hashtag, but also on social media, Instagram, it's the @ with that same acronym.
Wow.
So, and it's also -WA, because we figured we start in Washington, but who knows how far it's gonna go. So we'll start there, and we're thinking about other social media platforms as well. We have actually used it on our own LinkedIn pages. We've shared the letter on LinkedIn, and there's actually a click here if you want to sign, which takes you to a Google page where you put your name down. If you want to use your title, great. And then we actually adhere your name to the letter. Wow. So it's a dynamic letter.
There we go. I mean, y'all have thought of all the stops. Ms. Jacquelyn Howard, thank you so much for being here. And thank you for helping to be a part of the collective to lead this effort, standing with black women. I'm sure there's going to be other opportunities to continue to stand with black women. So thank you so much for your work.
And I want to say thank you for having us on the show.
Absolutely.
I speak on behalf of the other three of us.
Absolutely. What a pleasure. Oh, y'all, this is what I'm talking about here. I get goosebumps because I get so inspired. I get to wrap all this up right after this short break. Stay tuned. You're watching The Day with Trae.